So now we move on to probably my least favorite of the books, and that is The Goblet of Fire. Not to say it's a bad book, but there are some great moments in it I love, but there's also a lot of moments I don't like. So let's get into that. As before, summary, then my thoughts. Let's jump in. We open with a story about the unsolved murders of the Riddles and how they were found one day and no one has figured out how they died, but they were all just killed randomly. And then after that, and you get to meet their old gardener who's keeping up the place, and the gardener, who's a really old man now, comes in and witnesses Wormtail, or Peter Pettigrew, talking to something in a chair, and then a snake comes in. The old man has a conversation with whatever this thing is in this chair, and the thing kills him. Harry, once again, at the Dursleys, this time he gets a letter from Ron saying, hey, you're going to the Quidditch World Cup, just like our World Cup, and all. But basically, what happens is, while they're there, you see this game, then afterwards, that's where you finally get, for the first time in the series, to meet the Death Eaters. The Death Eaters attack, and the Dark Mark gets thrown into the sky. The Dark Mark is the symbol that shows that the Dark Lord has been there. So, or one of his followers. It was one of the big things in the First Wizarding War, where people would come home, and if you see a dark mark above your house, you know you're about to walk in and see the rest of your family dead. So it was a very terrifying thing that the Death Eaters would use to, traumatize people. Someone threw the dark mark up into the sky, and this house elf named Winky gets blamed for it and gets freed. Causing Hermione, the rest of the series really just save the house elves, house elf rights and all, spew as it's called, which I'll talk about later. And then after that, they go to Hogwarts, figure out, and guess what? Quidditch has been canceled that year.
Yes! 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 Yes!
For those who have seen my other videos, you know why I say that. But it's because the Tri-Wizard Tournament is happening this year. Basically, the Tri-Wizard Tournament is a tournament where 3 schools come together and they do a tournament to see who has the best student in each of these schools. And that's where the Goblet of Fire comes in, because the Goblet of Fire is the device that's used to determine who's going to be competing from each school. So basically what happens is, to be honest, I'm actually cutting out the first couple months of the school year, because that's just things are going on, and then the Tri-Wizard Tournament happens. So I'm just cutting straight to the Tri-Wizard Tournament. So basically we cut to the day where people have put their names in. Only people over the age of 17 can put their names in the Goblet of Fire, and it clears out each of the 3 houses' names. And then at the end, it gives out one more slip of paper, and Harry Potter's on that.
Did you put your name into the Goblet of Fire, Harry? Dumbledore asked calmly.
Harry, you put your name in the Goblet of Fire.
I probably should have just started this video by saying, this is the one that Dumbledore asks Harry calmly something. Yeah, they have to compete in this tournament. The first one is they have to rescue an egg from a dragon. Then they have to swim to rescue someone from the bottom of the lake, and they have to go through this maze in this hedge and all, and whoever gets to the cup first wins. Harry's having the help of his friends. He has this big, right after he gets put into the tournament, he has this big breakup with Ron, because Ron is jealous of Harry for getting all the fame. They stop talking until the first task happens, and then they become friends again. We're cut to, there's other people helping him. Mad-Eye Moody, who's the new Defense Against Dark Arts teacher, shows them how the 3 unforgiving road curses: Killing Curse, the Torture Curse, Control Curse, or Avada Kedavra, Crucio, and Imperial. Where basically, one kills, one tortures, one basically puts someone under your control. And he teaches them how to try to fight off the Imperial's curse, because that's the only one you can kind of fight off. I'll get back to that in my thoughts later. Basically, jumping around the book a little bit right now. Cut to when they just get through the hedge. Cedric Diggory, who's the original champion for Hogwarts, gets to the cup at the same time as Harry, and they both grab on. They did this on purpose, and they get transported, instead of to the beginning again, to a graveyard. Peter Pettigrew comes out of nowhere, and you hear this high-pitched voice says, "Kill the spare," and then boom, Cedric Diggory dies. The first child to die in the series. I'll get back to that later, but just wanted to point that out. That's a pretty great moment. Also terrible moment too. And then Voldemort comes back to life.
No! No! No!
Voldemort explains how there was a whole plan to get Harry into the Tri-Wizard Tournament so that he would be the first one to get to the cup, and thus be transported here because they want to use Harry's blood as the blood of the enemy because that's a part of the potion. Because thus Voldemort can touch him now. We'll come back to that later because that does play into the later books and what happens with that. But he managed to escape Voldemort and he returns back with the cup and the body of Cedric, and he explains to Dumbledore Voldemort's back. The Minister of Magic does not, but as they're just standing there, Mad-Eye Moody comes and takes him away, and then you figure out that it's not actually Mad-Eye Moody, and Mad-Eye Moody was captured by Barty Crouch Jr., who for the whole book you figure more about this kid who became a Death Eater, and he was the son of a high ministry man, and thus bringing shame upon the family. And you figure out that what really happened was his father actually helped him, actually pulled him out of Azkaban and replaced him with his mother so that his mother could die and he could continue living, because that's the mother's dying wish. And he's just been keeping him under the Imperius curse the whole time so that he doesn't run away, but he managed to escape and joins Voldemort again and helps him bring him back to life. So then, now Voldemort's back. Harry is in mortal danger, and the book basically ends. There's a lot more that goes on. There's a ball, different stuff like that. As I said with all the other ones, I gave a brief history, a brief summary, and not going over every single thing that happens. But yeah, that's a brief summary of what happens in this story. On to my thoughts. Starting with the negatives, like normal. I'm gonna start with the opening chapter. I feel like it destroyed the story for me. Just like with the first book and how the opening chapter was like, okay, I wish you did this differently. The same way, I think it gave so much away in the opening chapter. I like the part where it explains the Riddle's murder, because then that plays into the Half-Blood Prince. When I was reading it, I was thinking, honestly, I would have preferred having that in the Half-Blood Prince. It also just gave too much away. Like, I felt like it would have been better if there's like little visions throughout the whole story, but it wasn't until the end that you had everything revealed. In the beginning, it was kind of revealed a little bit too much, in my opinion. But hey, that's just me. The next one is something that I haven't talked about too much, but it was bothering me for the first couple books when we rereading them and all, and then really at this point in this book, when I finally just said, "Write down, we need to talk about this." And that is, there was so much re-explaining stuff, especially at the beginning of this book. This book begins by basically having after that chapter, it cuts to Harry, and it's like a previously then, like those scenes at the beginning of an episode where you skip past the previously then because you don't have to see that again, especially if you're binging a show, and I'm binging these books right now. And so I'm like, I don't need that, but it's like half of the chapter is just, this has happened, this happened, this happened, and you're like, previously on Harry Potter, this happened. Like, I don't need that. Like, please, just move on. And then it's just like each book explains the characters multiple times over again. A shallow-skinned, greasy-haired man could have just said Snape in the first book. You could have just been like Snape, and then later on been like with his greasy hair. You mean like you could have added that back in again, but in the same way, it was too much of re-explaining stuff that you did. Like, okay, people who read the first book is going to know what this character looks like. You can move on now. It's like you don't have to re-explain what the character looks like every couple chapters. I'm like, I don't know, it just got on my nerves. The next problem I have is something that they actually fixed in the book, and I said I was going to talk about this. Keep mentioning it. I'm not a big fan of the games, Quidditch. Just every single time that comes up, I'm like, can you just move on? And so during the Quidditch World Cup, I was just like, okay, please move on. I don't care to see more of this. Yes, you set up an important character for the book, but in the same way, I'm like, okay, move on. And so when it came out to the point where like, there are going to be no Quidditch games this year, I'm like, yes, let's go. Like, I don't hate Quidditch. I just don't like reading about Quidditch that much. Some people love the Quidditch scenes. That's one of the problems people have with the movie version of this, is that they take out that scene with watching the World Cup and it just skips right through that. And people are like, why did you do that? I'm like, I prefer that. I didn't want to watch the World Cup, to be honest. Like, Quidditch makes no sense. I don't care to read about Quidditch. That's just the truth. I don't like Quidditch. I just don't like Quidditch. But yeah, so in the end, I didn't like that scene. I didn't like the Quidditch World Cup, but in the same way, I did like the fact that they did not have more Quidditch after that. Now we get to one of the big problems we will have with this book, and that is the introduction to Skew, is the organization that Hermione starts to protect ourselves. And man, I hated Spew the first time I read the books. And after someone pointed out, hey, isn't it weird that everyone hates Spew and all? Then I realized they make Spew out to be this like awful thing. really what Spew is saying, hey, let's not have slaves and all. Why did J.K. Rowling think it was a good idea to try to justify slavery? The whole big thing is like everyone else besides Hermione knows like, hey, house elves like to be enslaved. Not joking. That's the thing. House elves like to be enslaved. How? Why?
Huh?
I'm not gonna go too much into that, but like slavery is a good thing in the Harry Potter series apparently because they're trying to justify why slavery should be a thing. And at the end of the last book, you have Ron come around, but really that's the only person who ever comes around in the whole series is Ron. It's like, she keeps being like, yeah, we should free house elves, we should not enslave them. And we should allow them to have an income instead of just saying, yeah, you do your work for free. Nope, they're enslaved and that's where it should be and that's what they like. And it's like, okay, stop it. Nope, that is not a good thing. And the next big problem I have is that of the whole thing with Ron and Harry falling out of friendship, during this book. That is the worst part, and one of the reasons why I would put this book on the lower end is because, honestly, there's a lot of annoying moments in this. That is chief among them. As I talked about in my review for Philosopher's Stone, I came from a family that's not always perfect. I'm not going to go too much into my family, just like I said I was not going to do when reviewing that book. But in the same way, I'm a younger brother. I have an older brother, I have older siblings, but I'm mentioning my older brother, and especially in this case, because I know what it feels like to be Ron. I know what it feels like to have that be overshadowed by everyone. So Ron is not in the wrong to be like, I feel like cheated because my best friend is always overshadowing me. I can't stand out even with my best friend. Like, yeah, I'm best friends with Harry Potter. And even then, it's like, he feels like, even his best friend is stealing any fame he could ever have. And it's like, I'm not saying you need to have fame, but in the same way, I get where he's coming from with this feeling of wanting to feel like someone cares and all. And so I get where he's coming from. But why I'm mentioning this, and especially, is because of how Harry reacts to this. I get it. I somewhat get why Harry would react like this. But in the same way, he gave us so privileged only child syndrome. Like, he's like, hey, so the reason why Ron is having a problem with you is because he thinks you want this fame and you put your name in the Goblet of Fire and now you're reaping all this glory you're getting out of it. And he feels cheated. Like, he feels like you're just constantly stealing all the fame. Like, everything, he helps you with something and you get the fame from it. And his reaction is not, okay, I should probably talk to Ron and be like, hey, I didn't put my name in the Goblet. Yeah, he did somewhat first talk to him, but after that, Ron and him would refuse to talk to Ron, and that's a big point. It's less that Ron refused to talk to him and more that he refused to talk to Ron too. Like, Ron wouldn't talk to him because he wouldn't talk to Ron. That's like, why? That's why Ron wasn't talking to him. And it's like, his reaction is, well, he needs to get over it. He needs to just get over it because I didn't put my name in the Goblet of Fire. I didn't want this, so he should learn to get over that. I'm like, the thing that makes me so annoyed about that is in the end, they do come back around again. But how do they come back around? Because Ron decides to give it up. Decides to allow that feeling of, yeah, my feelings, this feeling of inadequacy, like this feeling of not being wanted, that doesn't matter because I want to be friends with Harry. Like, yes, that's somewhat a good thing, but in the same way, like, I don't know, maybe as someone who had struggled with that myself before, I would have preferred if they had it so Harry, like, he went to try to apologize in like a fake, kind of a half apology type way, but it's just like, I hated Harry in this book, if you can't tell, because of this. Harry, like, Ron's like, oh, it doesn't matter. I'm like, no, it does matter. Your feelings, your opinions matter. I'm talking like right now like I'm Ron's therapist and he's actually a real person. I'm like, oh, looking to the camera, Ron, your feelings matter. Like, he's a made up person. But in the same way, people like Ron, if there are people like Ron out there, come from a big family, or even come from a small family, or like whatever it is, who has this feeling of you are just in everyone else's shadow and that you're never able to stand out at all. Do not take this book as an example of why you should just accept that and be like, yeah, that's okay. No. Ron never steps out of the shadow of Harry and all. In the whole series. That's one of the biggest problems I have with the series in general. This is actually kind of tough to talk about somewhat. You have a right to have those opinions. You have a right to have those feelings. That's okay to have those feelings. Should you go against your friends because of that? Maybe not. But in the same way, you have a right to have feelings. And this book gives the impression that people who feel like they're in other people's shadows don't have the right to have that opinion because those people in the spotlight deserves it. And that they should just accept that. Like, that's the lesson I got from it. That's the lesson it felt like it was given off. And I'm like, no, they should have had it so Harry had to apologize to Ron and say, I'm sorry. I didn't, like, he kind of, like, in his head was like, yeah, I don't want to take all the fame. Like, Harry's not the type of person who likes having a bunch of fame. But in the same way, he doesn't ever apologize to Ron for treating Ron terribly, for having feelings, for having this feeling of coming from a big family, being the youngest boy. Point out that I'm not the youngest boy, so that I don't match with him with that. But like the feeling of constantly being lesser than everyone else. That's a feeling that people feel, and we should not allow stories to try to tell that somehow they're ridiculous and they just get over it. J.K. Rowling, she should have had Harry apologize and validate. Yes, Ron, I'm sorry you had these feelings. I'm not trying to steal the spotlight. I'm not trying to do this. It happens. You're my best friend. You're not beside me. You're with me to the end. Like, Ron, he kind of had these feelings in the back of his head, but instead of validating that Ron feels this way, he just says, yeah, get over it. Get over it. And I'm like, no, I don't like that at all. Don't tell the kid to just get over it. Like, that's not going to help him at all. So that's a big problem I have with this book. The last one I want to quickly mention of the negatives. Again, I keep saying I'm not going to go too much into books versus movies, but I do want to quickly mention this. I do like the fact that in the book in the movie they just made it so Neville, like, it was the first sign that Neville was more than just the bumbling idiot. I liked it how they had Neville give the gillyweed. In the book they did have it so it's like that was the first plan. He never asked for Neville's help, but in the book they had it so in the movie they had it so Neville actually came up to him and helped him. Like, I felt like the movie was better that way. Eventually I might put out videos on this channel where I compare books to movies, but I don't want to go too much into that on these videos. But yeah, I just wanted to mention that. I'm like, yeah, the movie did change it up for the better. Like, the book had the idea of that. In the end book, they explained that was the plan, but I like how they actually just had that as what happened in the movie. Though, I did like having Dobby back in the series again. Anyways, on to the positives. Again, I do like the Tri-Wizard Tournament. I thought that was great. The introduction of more characters. The introduction of more, like, that there's other schools outside of that. The wider world of Harry Potter. I wish they had people from Illinois, the American school, come out. Because, again, it wouldn't have been the Tri-Wizard Tournament anymore. But I feel like that's a big one. With, like, wow, like, you don't hear about that school until Fantastic Creatures and Where to Find Them. But I love the fact there's other schools out there. I did like each of the events in the Tri-Wizard Tournament. I love how it advances the story. Especially, I love it how we had the first major death in the series. It doesn't kick off a little bunch of stuff, but it also, like, this was a turning point in Harry Potter. Everyone who remember when the books were coming out, there was a turning point when this book came out. And people saw that Cedric Diggory had died. Because now it wasn't just this fun little kid story. Guess what? Teenagers can die. This character died. This kid died. There was a lot of people who boycotted Harry Potter after this book because of that reason. And I think it's great that book, like, it was a turning point into the last 3 books, a lot darker because of that. That people can die. The last book, can't wait until I review the last book, because there's a lot of deaths that are very powerful in that last book. In the second last book, the Half-Blood Prince had some pretty incredible deaths too, but like that, the best part, some of the best parts about Harry Potter is the death scenes, in my opinion. Not that they're great, but in the same way of like the feeling of, yeah, people die. I wish people didn't die, but they do die, and thus we have to deal with it. And so I like that part. Yeah, I think this book is solid. I'll give it a 6 out of 10. It's not as great as the other books, in my opinion. Probably the lowest one on my list, but it's still a great book, and there's a lot of great moments in it. I love it how it extends the Wizarding World a lot, and you had the first, like, one of the big things, the first introduction of the unforgivable curses, something that people had that problem of feeling like Harry Potter, like they had this, like when I was going into reading the Harry Potter books, I haven't talked about this yet in my books and my reviews yet, but I guess this is the time I'll bring it up. I wasn't allowed to read Harry Potter as a kid. I watched the movies at age 14, found my parents knowing it, and then I read the books. By the time I read the books, my parents were perfectly okay with it, because like, guess what? I think I was like 16, 17, and it's like, okay, at that point, you have the right to make your own decision. If you want to read these books, we don't approve of these books, but in the same way, if you want to read it, you are old enough to understand it. So go ahead. But anyways, for people's criticisms about this, I love it how in this book you have the introduction You had it before, like, these things of, like, yeah, these wizards who go to prison because they do bad spells and all. But this one was where you were introduced to the free, unforgivable curses. Curses that would automatically put you in prison. Killing, torture, and mind control. If you do any of these, you are bad. There's no, like, we'll talk about that later when we have good guys using those spells. But I like that. It was a really good thing to add, was this idea of, yeah, guess what? Let's make sure the water's not muddy here. These first couple of books, the water's not muddy at all. It's bad wizards do bad spells, good wizards do good spells. And later on, it muddies the water, and that's where it becomes a problem. But I did like that. So overall, I would say, yeah, again, 6 out of 10. Pretty good book. It's definitely on the lower end of the books, but I did enjoy it a little bit. Yeah, tell me your thoughts below. What do you think of this book? Thank you guys for watching.